Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MNA's Town Hall on the four-day work week. My name's Adam Jesperson. I'm the Associate Director here at MNA. I'll be our facilitator for this next hour for this conversation. We've got a smaller group and I recognize some names, so it's great that you're all here. Hopefully we're going to make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to cover some of the basics, cover our experience with the four-day week, and then open it up for all the questions that most folks seem to have about just the little details about how this works and what doesn't work. So please feel free to bring in whatever you need to here. If you could be so kind to put your name, the name of your organization, and where you're coming from today, I'd love to see who's with us in the room. Please take a moment to do that, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Emily. Good to see you. Hi, Sam. Oh, great. Thanks, Cindy. Chris and Trace. Great. Keep those coming. That's good for me to know. Feel free at any time as we're going through this. If you have a question or a comment, or you just want to kind of get a question into the hopper because for something that we're talking about, please put it in the chat. Also, we'll have some time towards the end just to raise hands and ask questions. I said, get into some of the weeds if you would like. That sounds great. Good. Glad you're all here. All right. Oh, I might be a little shaky. My internet says I'm unstable. Kate, am I coming through okay?
You're in and out just a little bit.
Video or audio or both?
Both.
Both.
There's
okay.
Short freezes though. Let's keep going.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. If that changes, please flag me. I shouldn't see it, but thanks. All right. So before we talk about our pilot, I want to take you back in time briefly. Take you back to the fall of 2021. Hopefully most of you might find yourself in a similar situation, but the fall of 2021 was right in the middle of the Omicron wave of COVID. We'd been in COVID for 15, 18 months at that point in time. And our workforce for MNA, this was the conditions that MNA existed in. We were in a truly hybrid workforce, hybrid workspace, which for us meant that we could work where we want to, when we want to, whether that's 8 to 5 or 2 a.m. to 8 a.m., whatever we'd like to do, and how it's best for you, whether it's from our home, from the office, wherever that might be. That has its advantages, and that has had its advantages. We've talked about those ad nauseum. You've kind of fallen in one of the camps yourself, I'm sure, whether you like to be at home or from the office or both or neither. But one thing it did create was it definitely muddied personal and professional lives, where we were, if you were working from home, the clock doesn't necessarily stop at 5 o'clock. You're still answering emails, still answering Teams messages, Slack messages, whatever that might be. You're getting kids to school, kids home, all those things. Our lives became not, home life and then there's work life, and we leave the office and shift from one to the other. But it's this blending, this melding of the two, which has its advantages and also has its disadvantages. Our programming here at MNA was, we'd been in a virtual space for about 15 months, and we'd done all these virtual trainings like we're doing here today. We felt like we'd really engaged with folks in a virtual space, and now we're trying to get back into in-person stuff, gathering smaller in-person events, and they were kind of in fits and starts. Try it, cancel it because there was a new wave of COVID, whatever it might be. But all of that felt like it was just layered on top of the work that we were already doing. And all of that in total, for M&A at least, we as an association felt like we had never been more valued as an association and looked to by our clients, our members, those that we serve, the reason we exist. We'd also never been more taxed. We felt like we had kind of been running at a marathon, or running at a sprinter's pace, running the marathon at a sprinter's pace. Our pace was unsustainable. So at the end, the fall of 2021, about this point in the year, last year, after our conference, right around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, when you kind of take a little bit of a break, a bit of a pause, a bit of a breather, kind of slow down and start to look towards the next year and everything that's coming, we started asking ourselves some questions and having some dialogue around how are we doing? And some common things started to come up. One, we've got to find a way to slow down. We've got to find a way to what we call stride out. We have to find a more sustainable pace with what we're doing. We want our team to be well. We know we're in this for the long haul. We want our folks to, our staff to feel invested in this and feel like they can be invested in this forever, for at least for as long as it's going to work for them, right? To be again, working at a sustainable pace. We need creative strategies to looking across the sector. We saw folks that were struggling to hire, struggling to keep people. People were tired, people were leaving, people were taking different jobs that may pay more. We need to find a way to increase recruitment and retention across the sector. Folks need more tools in their tool belt to bring people to their organizations and to have them stay and to be invested in the work that they're doing. We also need to find a way to address burnout across the sector. We were seeing folks that were leaving positions, leaving management leadership positions. And there's a lot of talk about this idea of well-being. What does it mean to be well for not just the folks that we serve, but for us that work in the nonprofit sector that are trying to do the job every day. We wanted to focus on well-being. So these questions were percolating to the point that, our board of directors, MNA's board of directors said, hey, what can we do? What can we do for the sector? What can we do for the staff of MNA that we think is going to, kind of try to address some of these questions, some of these comments? I give you that kind of set the stage for the conditions that allowed us to pilot a 4-day week, which is what I'm going to talk about next. But hopefully, if you take yourself back to that place, or if you find yourself in a similar place as this currently in the fall of 2022, you can start to see some commonality. I think most of us experienced some form or fashion of this within the last 2 years. Serendipitously, providentially, coincidentally, whatever you want to call it, we learned about a pilot that was taking applications for pilot participants for what's called a 4-day week. The company is called 4-Day Week Global. These are kind of the pioneers of the 4-day week, the reduced hour work week across the globe. 4-day week was started by the CEO of another company. That company was called Perpetual Guardian, kind of a nondescript, trust-based, like financial services company based out of New Zealand that was, just run of the mill, that a decade ago decided to start a reduced hour work week, a 4-day week, and overnight became one of the most popular employers in the world, and had enough success with that company, that person started a nonprofit called 4-Day Week Global to spread the news about the 4-day week across the world, and started running pilot programs across the world, a North American pilot, a British pilot, a New Zealand pilot, all these pilots across the globe to prove out the validity and worthiness of a reduced hour work week and the parameters that they've established. They were taking applications for 50 organizations in North America to be a part of a pilot that ran this past spring. And we happened to apply and be accepted. So, and it was that time frame where we were asking questions about what could we do, and this kind of fell into our lap, and we decided to jump at it and at least test the door, and the door opened, and we were able to participate in this pilot program. I give you that, and we'll talk about what those parameters are, but I give you all the detail about the company, because when you hear things about 4-day week pilots that are happening, it's these guys. These are the folks that are doing this work the most across the world right now. And they're continually running more pilots. So if you have an interest in this, coming out of this town hall, moving into the future, it is affordable and it is worthwhile to go to 4dayweek.com, see if there are any pilots happening in North America right now that you could be a part of. It adds some validity, adds some legitimacy, adds some parameters, and some training wheels to do this well. So the pilot, the one and only hard and fast rule of a 4-day week pilot through 4-day week global is this concept right here, 100-80-100, which says the organization will pay its employees 100% of their compensation, 100% of their salaries and wages in exchange for 80% of the time. It's the reduced hour week, the 4-day week portion, as long as the organization can ensure that they can maintain 100% productivity. And that's the kicker. That as long as is the kicker to this. 80% of the time doesn't necessarily mean 4 days. It may mean 5 days, but they're shorter. It may mean 6 days, but they're shorter. Whatever's going to work for you and for your organization. It just means a reduced hour 80% of the time. For us, that's 32 hours instead of 40. So that kicker of 100% productivity ensures that this isn't about doing less work. The outputs are the same. Our productivity is the same or greater because we're more well. It just means we're going to work less. And one of our pilot participants that was with us through this journey had a great quote. Her name's Megan. She's from an organization that had gone through a pilot previously. She said, we found that our work fit whatever container we gave it, provided we made some changes to the way we operated. That concept of, the work container, so far, for most of us, that container has always been 40 hours. There's nothing that says it has to be 40 hours. That's just what we've gone with, right? And there's reasons for that, unionization, all these things that have kind of pushed us into that size of a container. The pilot says, let's just shrink the container a little bit. And empower our employees to do their work in a way that allows them to do the same or more amount of output, production, productivity, mission impact in a slightly smaller container. Because we all have within our week, within our month, within our day, slack, things where we're not as productive as we could be, but we get the job done. That concept of kind of shrinking the container and improving our hourly productivity to meet the mission, the pilot believed that was possible. We believe that was possible, and it is possible. And frankly, we've been doing it as an economy, as a society, for the last 80 years. This graph right here, the green line, shows the hours worked per year for the average American worker from 1970 to 2021. So for this whole time, we've had a kind of a mandated 40-hour full-time work week. The blue line is adjusted for inflation already, the productivity per hour per employee within an organization. Now, productivity isn't the end all be all. Within a nonprofit, we have mission impact, which is, we've got this dual bottom line of being sustainable, but also doing the mission, which isn't just about making money. But I would posit that, if we think about our productivity for the mission, we would see the same kind of increase. So from 1970 to 2021, already adjusted for inflation, we are more than twice as productive in a single hour than the average worker in 1970. So we've kind of kept the same number of hours, and we've doubled our productivity within those number of hours in mission impact, in economic benefit, and all those things. That's becoming more productive within a container, right? So the pilot that we're a part of says, let's shrink that container a little bit, acknowledging that we are much more productive now and can be more productive if we're intentional about how we do our work into the future. These are some great snippets from way back when. In 1956, Richard Nixon, the progressive pioneer that we all know him to be, right? Foresaw that by, in the near future, everyone would work a 4-day week, because technology and economic gains that we were making would allow us to do so. In 1930, John Maynard Keynes wrote an essay called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, where he posited that his grandchildren would probably have a 15-hour work week because of increases in productivity and technology and the way in which the world was moving. I would posit that we have seen those benefits on the tech side, on the economic side, but we have not shifted the container in which we exist in and do our work in. Our pilot takes advantage of this to say, we're going to shrink the container a little bit from 40 hours to 32 hours and focus our folks on productivity, the mission, those things that matter, getting rid of those things that don't. And we think that we can hold that tension and do that work. So the guidelines of the pilot were pretty simple. It's based on productivity. That becomes the North Star, the gold standard, the thing that we're looking at. We define productivity. You define productivity for you. It's going to look different for each of you. And for us, we didn't have any new things that we implemented as far as what we're going to measure. We just said, we're going to measure the things that we've always measured on revenue and expense and membership and retention and training and engagement and client member satisfaction and response to TA requests, all the things that we've historically measured, we're going to continue to measure. And we shouldn't see a measurable impact or measurable change, or at least a decrease by shifting our time to 32 hours from 40. Once you've done that, once you've established these are the productivity measures that we're going to follow and adhere to, then you turn your team loose to say, okay, if we're going to do that, and we're going to shrink the container of our work week from 40 to 32 hours, what do you need individually? What do we need collectively to do to allow us to hit that end with this size of a container? You turn them loose and you empower them to do the job. You empower them to do what they need to do. It's staff led in that where they're coming up with the small little productivity hacks that work well for them, and the bigger pieces that structurally need to change within the organization to allow you to reach that end. We also had our staff opt into this, so the staff could choose. They could say, I'm not in for this. I'm going to work 5 days per week or 40 hours for the same amount of compensation because I don't think it's possible. So that opting in was kind of the step forward to say, yeah, we know we're a part of this. And we know that we have a responsibility to uphold our end of this, and let's go. Let's do it together. A benefit of the pilot, and I saw Samantha's question here. She said, would you recommend being a part of a pilot rather than doing this on your own? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? One of the major benefits that has been useful for us is that all of the pilots through the 4-day week have an independent third-party research component that's measuring the effectiveness of the whole pilot, but it also helps you measure the effectiveness for yourself. So we did some pre-survey work, some survey work throughout, and post-survey work, which we're still completing, that helped us measure productivity as a baseline and how we're going to measure that throughout. Also measuring our employee retention, employee well-being. So we had the surveyed employees at the beginning to establish kind of a baseline level of stress and well-being, and throughout, including in depth, like doing some time studies of how we're spending our time personally and professionally, and stress and health and impacts, economic or environmental impacts, with climate change. Are we having less of a carbon footprint by working 1 fewer day from the office? Those types of things. But it gave us this objective third-party research component that we could lean on to say someone's helping us prove out the effectiveness of this. I found that was a huge benefit. I think it was a huge benefit to give that to our board of directors to approve the pilot, to say that we're not just kind of fumbling in the dark trying to figure this out. We have a model, and we have some support, some really good support from Boston College University that's helping us measure out whether this is going to work for us or not. That was a big piece. These pilots, these are going on currently. We were part of a pilot that ran from April through September. So we just finished that up. And there's more pilots that have kind of started and completed in the wake of that. Anything you see in the New York Times or CNBC or Forbes or whatever that might be, Fortune magazine, is this organization and these types of pilots. The largest pilot that is currently running right now is in Great Britain, 70 companies, 3,300 employees. And so far, they're in the middle of that, but through some of the survey work that's come out, 88% of those that are engaged in the pilots have said, it's working well. It's working well for us. 95% of the organizations in the pilot have either maintained or actually improved their productivity. 86% are extremely likely or likely to consider keeping the 4-day week after the pilot period. That is a massive success to take 70 companies and to have that overwhelmingly positive response. just to give you a flavor of what this group is seeing and what I think we've seen in our own experience. So that's the big picture pilot perspective. I do want to talk about our approach within that and what we're working on moving forward. So MNA decided, we took that 180-100 concept, and we decided the 80%, how we wanted to define that was we wanted to actually have a 4-day work week, the true 4-day work week. So we didn't want to do 5 shorter days. We didn't want a lot of chaos and like everyone kind of having their own schedule. So we said we're going to have 4 days. We also started when we worked for the first number of months by saying we don't want our members, you all, to experience any shift or any change in our responsiveness to you. So we want to ensure, even though we're working 4 days, we want to ensure that we're open for business 5 days of the week, Monday through Friday, which meant that we couldn't all have the same day off. So we staggered it. You could either take Monday off or Friday off. And we looked at schedules to ensure that we didn't have all the staff. We're a smaller team, staff of 7, that everyone was taking 1 day off and no one on a Friday. Like, it was balanced, it was equitable, so that folks could take the day off that they chose, as long as we had coverage, and that our members experienced us as being open for business 5 days a week. That, in theory, works well from that perspective. What we found as a smaller organization was that when you have half of your staff off on a Monday and the other half of your staff off on a Friday, you really only have 3 days where your whole team is present and available for meetings, for collaboration, for being present with one another, for culture, all those things. So it wasn't a 4-day week in that regard. It was a 3-day week of having the whole staff present. And you also had a shift in kind of the cadence of the work week, where you had on Monday, some folks were, just coming back from a 3-day weekend, others were off. Tuesday, you had folks weren't entering the week in the same place at the same time. And that created some heartache and created some hardship, I guess, for us because folks' energy level and focus and ability to kind of dig out their inbox and, all those things were different for each individual person. And it created a little more chaos than I think we were comfortable with. So what we shifted to, where we are now, what we're going to move with moving forward, now that we're out of the pilot, is for MNA, for the whole team to work Monday through Thursday and to have the whole team off on Friday. To ensure our continuity with meeting our members, meeting you all, we are also moving to a rotating on-call, soft on-call Friday, where each staff member once every 7 weeks is going to take one of those days, one of those Fridays, and check the M&A inbox, check the M&A voicemail box throughout the day, respond to items. They don't have to be working an 8-hour day, but they're on call. They're there for member needs, member service as needed. That's not an onerous thing, but it allows us to still be responsive and be present 5 days while adding a little more structure and continuity to our schedules. So that's what we're doing now as far as the schedule. It's a work in progress with our approach. Some of the things we focused on, and you heard this a lot, I think, with Banks last week, if you were part of that town hall. Banks was actually our mentor that was assigned to us by 4-Day Week Global. He was one of the assigned mentors from them. He's got his own thing aside from 4-Day Week Global, but he was our mentor. And we took to heart a lot of the things he focused on last week. The big one, which is prioritizing and deprioritizing activities. Not everything that we do is mission critical and is important. And it's kind of the 80-20. 20% of the things you do lead to 80% of the impact. You've got to hone in on what are those 20% of those things, and ensure that you're giving time, space, and resource to those, and being able to deprioritize things and say no to things, knowing that our container is smaller. So our ability to do all the things and be all the things for everyone is a little bit less, but we need to emphasize that work which is important and de-emphasize that work which may not take up as much bandwidth. One of the concepts that we used to think through activities was just a little 2x2 matrix of effort and value. So those things that are high effort and high time should be high value, and we should try to define what value means. And those things that are, if it's low effort, low value, it should be, and low effort, those are things that we should stop doing. So we tried to put in context and use common language around our activities in regards to effort and value to help us sort through what should we do more of, continue to do, and what should we pull back on, knowing that our container for doing this work is smaller. Delegation and authority was another thing that we've spent quite a bit of time on and continue to work on. When you have fewer hours in a week, you need to be clear and need to be comfortable delegating activities to someone and then letting them take it instead of having to come back around them and spend that extra time doing it with them or doing it together or taking it back from them. You need to trust people to do their jobs and that they will communicate back to you when and how they need to. So give them authority to do their jobs, give them the authority to delegate things to them, let them roll, being very clear about who needs to be involved in what. Not everything has to be a full team meeting. You may be able to have some opportunity for 2 or 3 staff to gather and hash out all the details, and everyone else doesn't have to be a part of that, which is a hard conversation when you maybe feel like you're excluded because the whole team's meeting and you don't have to, or you're not there. But that's what you have to do. You've got to be very intentional around who's spending time on what, which includes meetings. And then this idea of optimizing time. Does every meeting have to be 30 minutes or can it be 15? How do we want to show up throughout our day? What times are we going to block out and say, I'm going to work on this at this point in time, and I'm going to set everything else aside, empowering our team, empowering our staff to take ownership of their own workday in whatever way is going to work best for them to do the amount of work they need to do in a smaller container. Our experience so far, if you look at those 3, it's about productivity and about well-being. Those are the 2 big things. Throughout the pilot, we have seen no measurable objective change in our productivity metrics as far as reduced. We have served as many or more members as we have ever. Our membership levels are as high as they have been. Our revenue is good. We're holding the line on our budget. All of the things that we have set out to measure at the beginning it's green light. It's all systems go. We've done the work. We've done what we said we would do. Our staff well-being, our staff stress levels, that's also a green light. Folks enjoy that extra day, and that leads to more balance throughout their day, throughout their week. And I think our staff would say very clearly that has led to a reduction in their staff. We have a more sustainable pace, which is what we were after, like I said at the outset. Our operations started with, I would say, an orange light, where it goes back to what Banks said about this being a daily fitness. You don't get good at running a marathon by just signing up for the marathon. You've got to train, and you get better the more you do it. And I think we found that we started, and there were some hiccups, there were some clunkiness, and there were some miscommunications and some things that we, not big balls that we dropped or anything, but it was internally we had some tension in how we do the work and how we show up for one another and what goes and what stays. We've gotten better at that. The daily fitness has actually been definitely a truism for us. Had a form that our staff signed, which not only laid out the schedule, but it also laid out what are some agreements, cultural agreements, logistical agreements that we're going to agree to as a team for how we want to do this and do this well. And these are the headers of what those agreements were. So one was productivity and accountability, which is what we've talked about, that we will have our eye on the end goal of being as productive as we need to and as we've defined it. And we will hold ourselves accountable to doing that. We will hold our teammates accountable to their portion of that. Trust and self-management. We will trust that you can do your job when, where, and how you need to, knowing that you know what you need to do. You can manage yourself. It's not about butts in seats and seeing people, in the office from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's about the job. It's about the output. We trust that you have what you need to do on your radar, and you will do that well. Flexibility, that we know that this requires us to be flexible, with time and how we meet with one another and how we show up for one another. And we want to maximize flexibility. That's what will allow us to do this well. Openness, this was a hard one for us. Openness when things aren't going well. We knew we were going to learn as we go, but it's hard for a team member to say, this isn't working for me. And it may be because it's actually not working for you, or maybe because you just perceive like it's not working for you. Those were hard conversations to have, especially early, because no one wants to say, hey, this pilot thing isn't working. I think we should get rid of it. And no one did. But to express any hesitancy of it going well was hard for us to kind of lean into, because we all wanted it to go well, right? But we had a value of being open with one another. And over time, we've gotten better at being open with one another about how we individually are perceiving how we're working with one another and what may not be working well, knowing that we're going to have course correction and adjustments as we move through this. 5, we did want this to be seamless for clients and members. We didn't want our folks that we work with, our members, our funders, those that we are responsible to see any change in our responsiveness in meeting our mission, which is serving the sector, serving you. And then also maintaining team culture. We really try to uphold that, our culture, our ability to connect with one another and be in relationship with one another can't suffer through this, because the easy thing to happen when you shrink the container, you shrink the number of hours that you're going to be together. It's really easy to put aside that which doesn't matter, which is the water cooler conversation, the conversation that's not about the work, but it's just about, how are you doing? Check in with one another and being in relationship with one another, because that's not efficient and that's not productive. We wanted to uphold this idea of culture and maintaining that as a core value, so that we could call out, hey, our culture might be suffering right now. We haven't connected on something, not just professionally, but just how are we doing? How are we doing as a team? Some of the logistical things that we've dealt with, and this may be, I'm sure you've got some logistical questions that are in your mind too. How do you do with holidays? What do you do with that? We have, 10, 12 stated holidays in our handbook. What do we do with those? We as an organization decided that, if a holiday fell on during the week, it was a paid holiday for MNA. Regardless of what day of the week that holiday fell on, we would take that holiday. But for that week, that was the day we took off. So we weren't working a 3-day week those weeks. It was just a 4-day week. In essence, that kind of means that we lose those holidays, right? But it was a shift that we were willing to make. So that holiday just becomes the day that you take off, whether that's a Monday, a Friday, or a Wednesday. How do you handle accruals, PTO accruals? So throughout the pilot period, we didn't adjust accrual rates. Now that we are going to implement this moving forward indefinitely, we've dialed down our PTO accrual rate and our PTO cap by roughly 20%, which is the 20% of time that we're no longer working. We've seen staff have take less PTO throughout this last summer. We took less PTO than we did the previous summer, and that is that's because folks don't, they have that extra day built in. So that's what we expected. We've dialed down the accrual rate and the PTO cap to account for that. And what we've done is kind of what Bank said last week, where we think about it less in hours and days and more about weeks of leave, weeks of PTO, knowing that a week now is 4 days instead of 5 days. So the adjustment we've made, if you actually look at it, when you think about weeks, there's no noticeable change. We have the same number of weeks available in leave as we did prior. It's just now that a single week is 4 days instead of 5. So that helped us kind of true up for ourselves what that shift means and what noticeable change that may have on the bottom line and on our accrual rates. And it's not, as long as you think about it in weeks instead of days. This concept of exempt versus non-exempt staff was one that was vexing for a while for us. So, when you're exempt, everyone is salaried. So when you reduce the hours that they have to work in a week, it doesn't change their salary, their wage, and that's fine. But when you're non-exempt and you're paid hourly, if you're working fewer hours, how do you ensure that person is, achieves the same benefit that your salaried staff have? And we had an HR consultant who was really clear with us, finally, after everyone wasn't, to say that exempt and non-exempt is totally different than salaried and hourly. Exempt just means, do you qualify for overtime or not? If you're exempt from overtime, you don't get overtime if you work above 40 versus non-exempt. But you can still salary your non-exempt employees as long as their salary, when you calculate that on an hourly rate, is still above minimum wage, you're okay. So we're able to move our non-exempt staff to be salaried non-exempt, which allows us that flexibility if they work 32 hours to still be paid, what they would have made if they worked 40 hours. And if they, they have one of those on-call Fridays where they work 34 or 35 or 36 hours that week, MNA isn't paying, that extra time. They've got that salary kind of built in. They still qualify for overtime if they work above 40. That's the qualification test between exempt and non-exempt. We also had, a question and something that's come up for us of, well, how do we handle those times of the year where the work is heavy and we have things that we need to do, and it's just not going to fit into a smaller container. We all have that, and we all need to be real with ourselves that there's more work there's physically more work than we can do in 32 hours. What are we going to do with that? We at MNA have actually built into our policy, and we actually implemented it this last September, where we can pause the 4-day week and say, hey, for this next week or month or 6 weeks, whatever the time frame is that we're looking at, we're going to go back to a 5-day, 40-hour-a-week schedule for our employees. We did that through the entire month of September this year because we've got conferences this year. And it's not feasible for some staff to do the work in a smaller container. And what would have happened is it would have been inequitable to our staff, because there's some staff who've got all kinds of obligations that, they were going to have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. There are other staff who maybe didn't have that heavy of obligations during that period. So they could have continued the 4-day week, but we said as a staff, this is, it's time for all of us to pitch in, all of us to do our part. So we're going to pause this for the whole organization. And we're all going to go back for this month to a 5-day week. There's no noticeable change as far as wages go, because we've salaried everyone. No one's working overtime, and if they did, they get paid for that if they're non-exempt. And it allows us to feel okay about saying we've got to meet the mission right now. We did ask, so we went back and forth, and for most organizations, the hours you work in a week it's a management decision, right? It shows up in the handbook, which the board approves, but it's a management issue, which doesn't necessarily rise to the level of having to be approved by the board. That said, we did go to the board for approval for us to enter into the pilot program. And we did just go to the board for asking for approval to implement a 4-day week into the future indefinitely, because we wanted to put this system and the structure into the bones of our organization, not just what this collection of staff decided they wanted to do for a while, right? Which is a management decision. But we wanted to say, this is how we roll at MNA, and this is policy, and this is what we want to do. So we actually went and got board approval, and they've been very supportive. I think because we asked questions and we're part of a pilot, and I think we did this the right way. But that process allowed us to make this more formalized than just making the shift, and I think it allowed us to have some lasting power if a different collection of staff in the future decides they want to do something different, the board can say, well, we approve this, and here's why. So those are some of the little logistical questions. I'm sure you have your own that you'd like to ask. But I'll end with this, and then we'll get to some of those questions. Our hope, the reason that we entered into this, first of all, was for MNA. It was for us. It was for our staff and for our team to find that sustainable pace, to find that ability to do the mission well and to be well while doing it. We also did it so that we could learn out loud for you all, for the sector, for Montana nonprofit folks across the state, to present this as a viable workforce option that you could consider to help with recruitment and help with retention. We also wanted to model well-being. We want folks to consider well-being at the forefront when they consider their employees. It's as important as the work they do in their community, the well-being of the people that are doing the work alongside them. And to spark some new ideas for our folks, for our members. This is employee-led. Turn your staff loose to come up with a solution that's going to work best for you and for your organization. Maximize flexibility and know that everyone can do something. It doesn't have to be 180-100 or the strict 4-day week like we've talked about here. It could be Friday afternoons off. It could be, we'll give you your birthday off every year as paid time off. Like everyone can do something, whether you're in direct service or you're in professional service or whatever it might be. you can do something that's going to have I would say, an outsized exponentially positive impact on your ability to recruit and retain and uplift your workforce. Everyone can do something. Find what that something is. Look at the way in which the mission happens for your organization, and empower your staff to come up with a solution that's going to work best for your mission, to both meet the mission and keep your people well. If you want to learn more, you can, Banks, his organization's a Smart Workweek. He's still taking folks who want to be a part of the cohort to learn about and figure out how to pilot a 4-day week. You can also go to 4dayweek.com and learn more about those global pilots. They also have great resources there around how do you talk to your stakeholders and your clients and your members or your community, those that you serve, about this. How do you talk to funders? How do you talk about those that are reticent and hesitant about this kind of a thing? So all kinds of different tools and resources, both of those places. Please feel free to check those out. And I'm happy to take questions. We've got about 20 minutes left. And I think oftentimes the devil's in the details. This is a great time for us to answer the questions that we've seen, things that we've faced, and that we've seen some of our pilot participants, those who've gone through this with us, have seen and how they've addressed things. What did you do to keep team culture strong if there's less time for the water cooler conversations? That's a good question. I think some of the things we did are, always opening our team meetings with first of all, having our standing team meetings, holding those. That was an important meeting that we're going to have every week. And opening them with, how you doing? Opening with a check-in or a question, the silly question that we all like to answer about, favorite Halloween costume, or when's it appropriate to start playing Christmas music in your household, those types of things. That they may seem hokey, but that's how you build culture. And so we lifted those up at the beginning of every team meeting and other conversations. We use Microsoft Teams a lot for communication, and I would say half of our Teams chats are work related, and the other half are GIFs and memes and all those things. And that's how culture gets built. That's the cartilage that keeps us together, right? And so I think we're cognizant and made space for that throughout our day. Kate, anything that you would add to that?
No, I think you answered it, Adam. Like, really, truly, we do have an active Teams chat and enough time to chat in our team meetings. And our team meetings are the gold standard. Like, you don't miss them unless you really are out of the office. Yeah, and they're once a week team meetings. It's not a big deal, but we also have a ton of other just collaborative meetings through the week and time to be together.
That actually worked. That's a great question. You're charging time per hour, and that's, I'd be interested to see what those contracts might look like, to see if you're really booking the number of hours, or if you're just saying, 20% of a person's time, 20% of the person's salary is booked towards this. So your allocation, if you're just going off of wages and the time per people's time per hour, you could do that just allocation in that way, where it's going to be the same even if it's fewer hours. But if it's actually saying, this person spent 6 hours here and 8 hours there, that gets to be a harder conversation. It's a good one to follow up on. I don't know if I have a great answer. Sam asked, are you all in the office for 4 days? Or are you still hybrid, remote, or office? So far, we have still maintained a hybrid workforce. We've got some folks who prefer to be in the office full time. We've got some folks who prefer to be home at all times. I think now that we have come out of the pilot period, we will probably implement something that says everyone will be in the office, at least a day a week. But we haven't seen a huge impact in lack of presence and lack of ability to do the job by having folks working from home and having other folks in the office. So we've maintained that hybrid space, and it has worked well for us.
I'm going to ask my question on this because I'm not sure how
Please.
to type it. So,
Yeah.
how do you deal with, so we're super flexible with our employees around, like, I'm not sitting there looking like, okay, you're supposed to be here at 8:30 and it's 8:45 and you're just rolling in, or, you know, if people need to run a quick errand during the day, I don't get too worked up about that. But I feel like if we switch to this, I'm going to have to hold them to more like, okay, we're giving you an extra day, but that means that the days that you're here, like, you need to be here. How do you?
Aaron, I'm sorry, my AirPods cut out on me for a second. Could you start your question again? I'm hearing you now.
Yeah. So I just want to know, like, we're super flexible with our staff as around, like, we're not watching like who's showing up exactly at 8:30, or, you know, if people run out to do a quick errand or things like that, or leave a little bit early, it's not a big deal. But I feel like if we're taking a work day away, then I'm going to have to be a little bit more strict, I guess, around people holding to their schedule. And I guess, how do you encourage, or do you have any thoughts around how I would do that without anybody thinking that, like, suddenly I'm just a mean boss that's making them adhere to a schedule when I didn't before?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's something that we talked about and tried to address too. First of all, I think one thing that really grounded us as a staff was that opt-in document. So that 2-page, for us, 2 pages that doesn't just say the logistics of here's how this is going to work, but it actually has some of those cultural agreements of how we think we need to do this well. I would say one of those should be for you, presence, yeah, and showing up. And, you know, so we also did talk about at MNA, you have an extra day off, which means as much as is possible, it's not easy for everything, but as much as is possible, schedule your oil changes and doctor appointments and dentist appointments and those things on that day. That becomes a day for you, because there's less time. There's, you know, the container's shorter in these 4 days. So try to optimize that time. It's not perfect, but try to move staff towards that. So that might help some of the flexibility piece. But as far as just like when we show up in the office and when we don't, I think that's a great thing to just kind of pose the question to the team to say, all right, here's the mission, here's the work we have to do, and we're going to do it in a slightly smaller container. How do we do that well? And how do we show up in the office to do that? That piece, I think folks will probably get there themselves to be able to say, yeah, like I know, like, if for me to do this, I'm gonna have to be here at 8:30 and I'm not going to leave till 4:30 or 5. But I'm willing to do that because I get Friday off, you know. So I think let the team come up with that, but you could probably start that conversation by just saying, you know, how much flexibility can we keep within the 4 days in which we're working and still do the mission? You guys tell me. So it doesn't seem like the boss saying, well, I have to be here at 8, you know. Kate, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say that's also part of our culture of trust, that like we have a team trust value, that we trust you to get the job done. And sometimes that might mean, like, if you had to take an appointment on a Tuesday, then maybe you do work a couple hours on your Friday, on your day off, and you do what you need to do to accomplish your tasks, and it's less time-based and more about allowing employees to manage their time to get their job done.
Mhm.
and to be present for the team. So we maintain that sense of flexibility. Yeah, but we still get the job done.
Yeah. Chris asked if I'm willing to share that document template. I think I would. I'll review it just to make sure that there's nothing in there that the team wouldn't want to be shared out. But it's, you know, it's pretty straightforward, and I think it's written well. We spent a lot of time wordsmithing it on what we're going to put into that document. I'd be happy to send it out. First of all, we had that was the document we used to lead into the pilot. We actually just changed it and made it into the policy, which is our 4-day-week policy from now into the future. And I'm happy to share the policy version, which is probably more applicable because it doesn't talk about a pilot. It's just, this is the policy. This is how we do this. Sam said, it seemed like the 100% productivity part addresses the flexibility piece. Yeah, and that's why I led with that. Of like that becomes the North Star. That's the thing that we hold ourselves to. And then we're not going to sweat the small stuff on meeting that, knowing that, folks' ability to show up and do the work is going to look different. We know that now. But we're going to focus on that, focus on output instead of, activity, being present in certain times of the week. Time in the chair, like Kate said. Other questions?
I have a quick question. I work at a food bank, and so we provide direct service.
Yeah.
And we have quite the mix of staff members who do more behind the scenes work, more development work, and staff who are more frontline. And I'm curious if you've heard of this working well or have seen this work well in organizations with that kind of mix of employees.
Yeah, it's a great question. Kate mentioned it, that there's an article that just came out. It's about a direct service. Yes, they do residential housing and direct service for mental health organizations who went to what they call a 4-day week, but I think it's a 36-hour work week. So that's, I think, where I said everyone can do something. When you have obligations of being present for your clients, direct service in your community for X number of hours, it may not work to go to a strict 4-day week, but you can do something, or you can shift schedules and shift shifts to allow you to do that. So I think you can find what will work for you, and also understanding, like, you may have some of your staff, maybe your professional staff, development staff, folks that are behind the scenes that could theoretically do that, but you've got staff who are on the front line, who are filling those shifts and handing out food and interacting with clients who can't. So there's an equity piece there too, and will we allow this for this folks and this for over here? So how can we, knowing that it might look like two structures, you may have one structure that's 36 hours, 32 hours for these folks, and others 36 and 32 hours for these folks, but the model looks totally different. So think about it in a role format, and also consider equity, because there's some folks where this is just easier for you to do. That's not the greatest answer, but I think we'll try to send out that resource, that article that shows how there was a mental health center in Utah that implemented a reduced hour work week, a 36-hour work week across their whole organization that could help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that article. Thank you.
Yeah. Aaron said, I think I'm gonna have to go back and think about how to measure productivity amongst direct service staff. Yeah. And that becomes, once you've got that nailed, then your performance management piece, your check-ins, the things that you're working on with your staff becomes so much easier, because it's about how do we do at meeting the mission, at being productive, but it's production towards the mission, not just about dollars and cents. Tylin said, I think there's something to be said. Hi, Tylin. She's also a team MNA. Said about being seen less as something that's being given to employees, and more about something the organization finds value in because they value meaningful rest. Absolutely. And I think that's definitely a piece why we involve the board in this. So that wasn't just about what staff can come together and kind of give to the team, but about the board saying, this is a value. This is how MNA rolls, because we think this is what's best for the team MNA and broadly the sector. Great. And Kate put that article in the chat if you wanted to find that. It doesn't, it's not super detailed on logistics, but it does mention that this is what they did, and they saw benefits in productivity. And it's probably a bigger leap of faith to do this in a direct service organization and say we're going to have shorter shifts or more people working shorter shifts. But think about what it might mean for you if you don't have to worry about open positions, because everyone wants to work for your organization, because you've got a shorter work week. Like that has a benefit in and of itself that I think will come back to you tenfold versus just trying to cobble together with what you have now. Yeah, there's an HRDC in Havre that's attempting a 4-day week right now. And we should hear next week too. So this is part 2 of this series. Part 3 is Kelly Rosenleaf with Childcare Connections. So it's a more direct service organization, and they've implemented a different model than what MNA did, and might be worth asking her to. Not might be, is worth asking her to. Yes, Caitlin, this recording will be sent out.
Yeah, we're saving all these recordings, and we created a course in our Thinkific platform. I'll send the link to that, where we're putting these recordings and resources and kind of everything we know about short work weeks.
Yeah. And that I would encourage you again, check out the resources at 4-day week. They're not nonprofit specific, but it was really interesting to be a part of a pilot group across the continent with manufacturing organizations and bars and restaurants, and all these different types of sectors that it's not direct service, but they're on the front lines doing their thing. And they've got models that work for them too, that accomplish this 80-100, 80-100. So it might be worthwhile to learn from others, or even outside of our scope, outside of our sector, for how they do this, because they've got some of the same logistical challenges that we do. Yes, Sam says, would you say the 4-day week tie? What would you say the 4-day week tie is with DEI for organizations? Has your staff, you changed your staff diversity? We've not changed staff diversity simply because we haven't had any open positions to change it with. We haven't hired, we haven't had to change any staff. So we're smaller staff, we're staff of 7, and we've maintained. So our diversity on the staff side hasn't changed. We do focus on equity, especially equity by role, just as far as how we allocate time and resource and ensure that folks kind of have a equitable experience. Great. If you have any other questions, feel free to hang on. I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, be back here next week to hear another perspective that I think is very valuable to this conversation. Emily asked, are you personally more attached to your position because you have a 4-day work week? Yes, I would say short answer to that is yes. I am proud and happy to be a part of an organization that is willing to do this, willing to take this step and to advance this. And I'm also very happy for the benefit that it provides to me and to my family on a personal basis. We've definitely kind of seen that for me personally, having 3 days off in a row kind of gives me a day for chores, day for all the things that I typically would do, a day for family, and a day for rest. And I try to do that. I think my wife to me said the other day, like, I don't know how we did all these things when you work 5 days, because I kind of just take all those things on that Friday and just do them, you know, do all those little things that you typically scramble to find the little window for to do throughout the week, or on the weekend between running kids around or doing all that. So yeah, it's been very beneficial, and I do find myself more attached to my position.
And I'm just going to echo Adam, like, yes, absolutely. Same. I do chores, errands on Friday. I have more time to spend with my kiddo on Saturday. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you next week or before. If you have questions in the meantime, reach out to us. We're happy to answer any logistical questions we have. We'll post some of those resources we talked about here, get them out as well as this recording. And yeah, happy to walk with you in whatever way is going to work for you, just answering questions or looking at a model. Great. Thanks all. Bye-bye.